Hi, everyone. I'm Karen MacNeil. Welcome to Wine, Food, and Friends. And today we have the pleasure of talking with Nicole Marchesi. Such a good Italian name, Marchesi, who is the winemaker of Niente Winery here in the Napa Valley. Nicole, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I want to start out, I love asking winemakers this question. So I want to start out by asking you something that is utterly simple, but why do you drink wine?
Why do I drink wine? Um, for a variety of reasons. I drink wine because number one, I like the taste. I think it's really delicious and super yummy, and I like the feeling of relaxing at the end of the day with a glass of wine, and I like that wine is meant to be shared, and that there's a sharing opportunity and connection with people over a glass of wine.
Yeah, it's such I mean, I think we who work in the wine business every day sometimes forget how elemental but incredibly important that aspect of sharing is.
100%. Um, I've been at Farniente now for 21 years, which seems like it has flown by. It's an incredibly long period of time. And I have a team in my cellar, many of which have been here for over 20 years. And when I stop and I think about the connections with these people that have been part of my life for 20 years, that's a really long time. And that we've made wine together, we've experienced harvest together. Um, it just reminds me how many people it takes to make one bottle of wine, and that's really special.
And it's something that isn't easily seen, when you I always think when you go into a bar, and you watch the bartender make a cocktail and they're shaking and pouring and then wine seems very staid by comparison. You don't
Hmm.
see all those hands, both in the vineyard and in the winery. So it's important for us, I think, to remind ourselves that
Hmm.
it doesn't just magically appear, that it is the really hard labor of so many people.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Farniente before this interview, I was thinking back to the very first time I had a Farniente Chardonnay, I remember this so distinctly because I was sitting next to Gil Nicole, the late owner of Farniente, who refurbished such a beautiful, important old historic estate in Napa Valley. And I was a young journalist. I was terrified. And, the Farniente Chardonnay had then, as it does now, such an incredible reputation. So I'm wondering, drinking it here with you, look, see,
Yes.
I've got mine right here.
Yep.
Um, what do you think? What's the main hallmark of greatness in Chardonnay? What does it need to have?
That is a really good question. For me, a great Chardonnay needs, at least the Chardonnays that I personally enjoy, are ones that have a sense of fruitfulness and varietal trueness, whether that's like melon flavors or some sort of citrus or honey, like honeydew, those kind of notes with some floral that has freshness to it. There should be some palate weight, right? It should coat your palate, but it should also have really refreshing acidity. So it's sort of like it needs to hit on all these levels and be really dynamic, um, and be really pleasurable. I think a really great Chardonnay is just you have a glass and you're like, oh, tastes so good. Tastes so good.
I'm feeling that way
Yeah, yeah.
now. It's almost the end of the day. So, yeah, no, I know what you mean though, because there's both the liveliness of acidity, but this beautiful duality of a kind of languorous softness that's very
Hmm.
hedonistic. And it reminds me that even though we Americans talk so much about flavor, maybe it's texture that is really what matters
Hmm.
in wine. I don't know. How do you think
Yeah,
about
absolutely. A lot of times when we're doing our blending trials, and or when we're going through and tasting all the individual fermentations because we'll have like, 50 or 60 different lots of Chardonnay that come together. Um, we focus a lot on texture because we know, you can get the general flavors there, but how the texture evolves, how the texture changes with the barrel choices that you make, with stirring the leaves, everything. We're always talking about how does it feel? Does it feel like silky, creamy, oily? Does it have build and progression? Does it fall off short? There's the the tactileness of wine is super important, and we definitely pay a lot of close attention to that. Um, and I like wines that have like start silky and then have that sense of like viscosity, and
Mm.
oily is a tricky word for some people. For us, it's a super positive one. We're always thinking about like that, it's like sort of glides across your palate. And that's definitely something that we look for in Chardonnay.
Yeah, I agree that I mean, oily is a hard word, and sometimes I use the word slippery. That's not much better
Yeah.
word, but it just goes to show how even when if you're someone like me, you spend all day long thinking about words to use with wine, but wine turns out to be very elusive. It can be
Hmm.
very hard to put what you mean into words, although you know it when you taste it,
Yes.
right?
And I know that I feel like a lot of people having tasting wine, they don't know the right words to use, or like, tell me what I'm tasting. And it's so much of it is just practice and learning words from other people who you taste with. You pick up words, or even a sense memory. There's certain times you taste it, like, oh, this completely reminds me of this very specific thing or this very specific moment. And I think that's also really special about wine is those sense memories that can come up for you.
Yeah, I'm not even sure we're supposed to have to be able to use words. Maybe we're just supposed to feel things.
Hmm.
I once read this great quote from a Harvard trained neurobotanist named Jill Bolt Taylor, I think her name is. And she said, we think of ourselves as thinking creatures who feel, but actually, biologically, we're feeling creatures who think. And
Oh, I like that.
and I know actually you
Yeah,
started biology, right?
I did. Yeah. So I was studying at UC Davis. I always knew I wanted to do science. It's a funny short story. But I was very lost. I decided to try lots of things. I worked for a quarter as a writer for the school newspaper, the Aggie. And I did an article about the viticulture and enology department, and I was like, oh, this is science, but it's like art science and people science. And so I took the intro class and changed my majors, and it really spoke to me on my need for science. I love experimental design. I love math. And like that speaks to my soul. But I also really love people. I really realize I get a lot of energy from other people. I need to be in a community, and the V&E department at Davis was this really tight knit community. And I'm like, oh, these are my people. This is what I want to do. Yeah,
How great. That is
yeah.
fabulous. You know, um, Back to words for a second. I've been thinking about a lot of words that sort of circle around wine, and one of those is authenticity.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering what you think is authentic about wine. Like, how does the word authenticity and wine? How do those two words relate?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me in authenticity is that the grapes come from a very specific place, right? So there is an authentic place that we keep track of, that we care about, that there are differences from vineyard to vineyard, differences from block to block, and crafting a wine that shows that sense of place is super important. So for me, that is authenticity. Like first and foremost is we stay true to where this wine came from, right? And then um, and then I think authenticity also takes into every step along the way, the decisions that you're making, not to try to force a wine, like square peg round hole kind of thing, forcing a wine to be what it isn't, that you're leaning into what that vintage gave you, what the site gave you. and leaning into what you're offered. And our job as winemakers is to capture the essence of a vintage in a place and show the best of what it has to offer. I mean, there's obviously should be consistency and similarities across vintages. And if you've got consistent farming, consistent sourcing, consistent people in the winery, you should have, consistency. But our job is to sort of harness the special things about each vintage too. And that I think is really authentic. We're not making Coca-Cola every year. Like we're making a new product every year.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword vintage though, because
Hmm.
sometimes people, I remember actually once saying, of all people, Kermit Lynch holding up a bottle. Is this a great vintage? And he came back really quickly and he said, "Good for what? Good for steak? Good for
Yeah.
oysters? Good for sex?" I was
Yeah.
just, and after that, I realized that over time I'd come to think of wine, think of vintage more as sort of the mood of the wine.
Mm.
Is it in a boisterous mood? Is it in an introverted mood? Is it shy? Is it going to become more dramatic later? But when you think of it that way, there's nothing that is classically good or nothing that is classically bad. It's just seeing a wine as you might see another person in different moods.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
it's making me think like of the the best vintage I feel like I'm the most proud of is our 2011 Niente Chardonnay because that was the first vintage. And I'd been winemaker for 2 years, and it was cold and wet and rainy, and it was an eye-opening experience for me of being able to make Chardonnay that was maybe less ripe but still beautiful. And I loved that challenge. It was really hard. We worked really hard that year, and I just love the way that wine really captured the essence of the coolness and the it's not austere, but it's just a little bit more mineral driven and fresh and lively. And I'm really proud of that one. And that one was definitely a very specific time and place wine.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that too. And I love those 2011 wines because they were utterly precise.
Hmm.
And I love it when wine, if wine is a sound, I like it when it's like sort of the equivalent of the sound of a church bell. Very precise, very exact. Um, yeah. If you were in charge of the whole wine industry in all of America, what would you change? What could the culture of wine in America do a little bit differently?
So, interesting discussion I had recently with my assistant, and then actually another vintner and barrel supplier, talking about generational sharing of wine. Right? I I feel like sometimes in marketing, in our wine marketing, we talk about okay, we're gonna market to the boomers, we're marketing to Gen X, we're marketing to millennials, like we're putting people in specific groups to market to. Where why don't we say like we're marketing to people, and we should say like what's special about wine is that enjoy it with your grandparents, enjoy it with your parents, like grandparents, bring your young adult grandchildren, expose them, and how much connection that we can make across families and across generations, I think would be really special. I was just really think because I enjoy wine with my parents. You know, I think that has been really really special for us. Or to share, yeah, to share with my aunts and uncles, and just like that cross generational sharing would be, I think, would maybe make it a little bit more part of our daily life, right, as families.
Yeah, it's such a good idea. And I'm reminded of there's a writer in the Pacific Northwest whose name is Paul Griegut, and Paul wrote me an email a couple of months ago and said, "Wouldn't it be great if every person over 50 in America who has some bottles of wine in a cellar or a closet somewhere, if they took out several of those bottles every year, 25 of those bottles, let's say, and specifically found someone 25 to 30 years younger than them and shared those bottles. And he said, you wouldn't even have to really know that person well. It would be this generational sharing, though, that would benefit the younger person, obviously,
Hmm.
being able to taste an older wine and maybe a wine they couldn't afford, and benefit the giver because it would help clean out that cellar.
100%.
Yeah. So
Yeah. What a
yeah,
great idea. That is a fantastic idea.
yeah. So, one last question for you, and maybe we hit on this just a little bit right now, but why do you think wine is important to the whole culture of a place? I mean, if you go to Europe, you could sort of feel that wine is threaded through
Hmm.
through the culture. But why is it important in the culture of America?
Another good question. I think we have touched on this a bit, the idea that wine can bring people together. And I think the communal aspect of wine is really important because we don't it's a full bottle. It's 750 mils. You should be sharing that with other people, right? And I think it would be great for our culture to look to our communities more, right? Instead of thinking about my cellar, my wine, let's think about how can I share my cellar with people? How do I bring my community together? It gives, um, I think it would give us more time to slow down, to plan meals together, instead of rushing through life and quickly grabbing a bite to eat. If there is a planned come together and sharing moment, that could only benefit us as people and as a community. Yeah, I think just any opportunity to bring people together for connection is really important.
Well, there's Come Over October
Yeah,
right there in a nutshell. Nicole, thank you so much
it's
for joining me today. And as I said, it's now the end of the day.
yeah.
I'm going to have a little bit of Farniente Chardonnay. Thank you.
Cheers. Yeah, you can. My pleasure.